Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that the first thing to go wrong in a room full of confident men is the assumption that a single frame of film can't lie. Donnell watched the grainy casino footage again, his finger tapping the trackpad with a rhythm that matched the tremor at the base of his skull. The screen threw blue-white light up into his face, the kind that made the skin under his eyes look thinner than it was, and every time the clip looped the same movement, Doug turning his head, pausing, glancing at someone off-camera. Donnell felt the scene reconfigure itself in his mind. He had seen it a dozen times, but details kept arriving late, like small, incriminating boats drifting into a harbor after the tide changed. Marcel lounged in the cracked leather of the couch, arms folded, jaw set, eyes trained not on the footage but on Donnell's face. He radiated irritation like heat. "You're wasting your time," he said, the words flat, practiced. "You can watch it 1,000 times and it won't tell you anything you haven't already told it." Donnell ignored him and slowed the clip. Two empty glasses at the table where Doug had been sitting snagged his attention. Two transparent, identical tumblers sitting close together on the felt as if two hands had been sharing a single thread of trust. He had already thought they were placeholders, the kind a waitress might set down while two drinks were on their way. But the glasses didn't float or blur in the way of background props. They sat deliberately, a pair that belonged to a quiet conversation or a plan made with certainty. "Why are there two glasses?" Donnell asked. His voice wasn't a question so much as a soft demand. He rewound and played the clip frame by frame. Doug's shoulders were shoulders of someone who had once believed rules could be bent without breaking. He had the look of a man who'd made a wrong turn and stayed on it for as long as he thought he could. Donnell watched the seat across from Doug. No one sat. No hand reached for either glass. The second glass didn't belong to Doug. It belonged to someone who had been there and left her, someone who didn't need to be seen to leave a mark. Marcel's irritation became a thin smile. "There's no point going down a rabbit hole. I don't know the guy. I was at a different table." "You got yourself wound up on hearsay and amateur night edits. You want something true, you go to the source. Otherwise you loop yourself into madness." Donnell could feel how much of Marcel's posture was armor. The man had a reputation for knowing how to direct attention away from himself, for folding questions into silence. He was not, Donnell thought, a man who spoke truth to danger. He was a man who learned how to look as if danger spoke to him and yielded. But the image of the two glasses lodged in Donnell's head and folded into memory like a coin slipped into a drawer. He ran the clip again. This time he watched for Hent's subtle movements, someone's sleeve twitching, the ghost of a cigarette smoke curl that would say someone had been there minutes before and left the mark. The second glass remained, untouched, and the table shadow seemed to collect all the things people didn't say out loud. In the hallway outside, the city hummed with a different sort of noise: police radios, taxi horns, a bar fight kicked off by too much cheap beer and fewer explanations. News moved like smoke these days. Even in corners that prided themselves on being insulated, news got in. Randy had been listening to that smoke and had decided it smelled like opportunity. Randy believed in small acts that had big ripples. When he heard that Drake had gone to the police and was cooperating with the investigation, had given them a statement, a map of places and names, Randy's mind went to arithmetic. Drake's cooperation was a new number in an old equation. If the cops had a witness willing to place them in the same orbit as Doug, that meant investigators could start asking harder questions. If investigators asked harder questions, something inside the network might crack. And if something inside cracked, Marcel could be the one to fall. He didn't want to be the one who threw the first stone. Not directly. Randy's courage came in the form of whispers and distance. He placed anonymous calls because you could throw a match from the end of a broom and still watch a house burn. The phone felt small and lethal when he cupped it in his hand. He called Jacob from a blocked line and dropped the unedited video into a place Jacob would find it. The video was raw, unrefined, the kind of thing that didn't tie neat bows. It was the truth before somebody came along and polished the edges until it fit a story they preferred. Randy told himself he wouldn't risk his life. He loved the idea of itself. Risk was a currency he was loath to spend. He was too clever to be reckless, too careful to give police or men in suits anything that would point back to him, and yet he wanted more than he wanted to keep breathing quietly that Marcel would be prodded, would be unsettled. The anonymous call was like letting a mouse into a cat's cage. He didn't want to be the hand that opened the door. Meanwhile, Donald found other kinds of doors he had to open. Randy's voice carried through the grapevine. Something else had arrived in his inbox, held in characters that felt like a small, cruel joke. A message short, unadorned, told him that Doug had gone to see Bill. He had asked Bill for a favor. The line that followed was simple. Bill had refused. Bill's place was the kind of office that pretended to be a barbershop and was sometimes a barbershop in the daytime. It had plants that hadn't been watered in months and a clock with one hand missing. Bill himself wore the kind of resignation that was hard-earned, slow smiles, slow nods, a man who knew the cost of saying no and had been saying no for longer than most people. Donald found him sitting in the same chair he'd always sat in. A cigarette rolled between his fingers though he hadn't lit it yet. He looked like someone who'd been waiting for the sky to change color before deciding whether to go outside. "I was surprised to hear Doug was here," Donald said when he sat down. The fact of the meeting between Doug and Bill sat like a bruise between them. Bill didn't make it easy. He was a man who measured answers backward, protecting what he refused to say with the cloak of what he didn't feel obliged to offer. "Doug comes to a lot of places," he said. "People come asking for favors all the time. Some I can help, some I can't." "What did he ask?" Donald pushed. He leaned in because the world had shrunk to the size of this conversation. Bill looked at Donald the way a man looks at a window when he knows a storm is coming, as if the glass might break, and if it did he'd be responsible for the shards. "He wanted me to talk to someone," Bill admitted finally. "To fix something, to pull a thread loose. I told him I couldn't. I told him it was bigger than me." "You told him to walk away?" Donald's voice was small and tight with the shock that sits under outrage. "You left him exposed." Bill's hand trembled just once as he tapped the cigarette against the ashtray. "I didn't leave him exposed. I didn't tell him to go anywhere. I told him the truth. There are things I won't touch because touching them drags you into the kind of trouble that doesn't have instructions. You don't pull on the wrong thread." "I told Doug that." Donald's face was a map of disbelief. "Bill, he trusted you. He came to you because he thought you'd be able to find an angle." "You said no." "I said no because the angle was a noose," Bill said. "Because I don't owe anybody a hell they can't get out of. I'm not responsible for what happens to a man who goes out and makes bad bargains." "I told Doug that and he left." "Left where?" Donald asked. He heard the way the word left wanted to be final, as if it could mean both the house he walked out of and the life he walked out of. Bill looked at the ceiling for a long minute. "He left across town," he said. "He said he had to clear something up. He promised he'd come back." "He didn't come back." Donald's hands went cold. The first shock came like a sound at a distance, a trumpet calling the beginning of war. He had loved Doug in the way men love other men who keep their secrets but share their strengths, like a steady ledger of mutual debts and shared nights. Doug had been messy, yes, but real. This Doug going to Bill and then not coming back felt like somebody taking a ledger and burning it while the ink was still wet. The longer Donovan stepped through the alley of facts, the more the city revealed its architecture of betrayals. Vanessa, Joey. Those two names had been in his periphery for weeks as gossip glowed like embers in cafes and bar booths. He had assumed Vanessa's life and Joey's life moved in orbit but not in collision. Vanessa, clean and practical, the kind of woman who kept lists she never showed. Joey, slick, charming in a way that kept people forgiving his debts. Then the rumor settled like dust on a table. Vanessa and Joey had something between them. They were close in a way that suggested complicity. Donald's stomach dropped when he learned it, not because it was scandalous but because it forced the geometry of the case into a new shape. If Vanessa and Joey were entwined, what did that mean for Doug? Was he a corner of a triangle he hadn't understood? Was he blind to an arrangement that had him labeled as the out-of-thread element? He thought of Doug at the casino table. 2 glasses, 1 empty seat. The possibility that the second glass belonged to someone who wasn't supposed to be there in plain sight had it belonged to a shared secret made his hands go clammy. If Vanessa and Joey were keeping a relationship private, what had Doug seen? What had he asked? Was Doug trying to protect Vanessa, Or had he been the one chipped away until there was nothing left to anchor him? Questions multiplied like metastasized cells. Each one demanded a surgeon's steady hand. Donald felt like he was operating with a butter knife. He confronted Vanessa the way you confront a mirror you suspect has been cracked. She wore a conservative blouse that did not care what people thought of it. Her face had lines that came from laughter more than worry. But her smile fell short when Donald asked questions. "Why would I be involved?" she said. "Joey and we have a history. But that doesn't make us conspirators. Joey and I aren't the kinds of people who plot murders." "It's not that simple," Donald said. "Doug went looking for help. He talked to Bill. He sought someone to pull him out. He ended up dead. He had 2 glasses in the clip of the casino. I need to know what you and Joey were doing that night." Vanessa's eyes widened. "You're saying Joey had something to do with this because he's with me?" She sounded equal parts offended and frightened. "Dennis, I don't know where you're getting your facts. But Joey's not a killer. He's a man who gets in over his head." Donald collected himself the way someone pieces together fragments of a shattered glass to see if they form the same original vase. "If he's not a killer, then tell me what he was doing with Doug. Tell me what Doug asked him for." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "Doug asked me to speak to Joey. He wanted to put things right. I told him I would think about it. I didn't promise anything. I told Doug I'd see what I could do." He seemed relieved. "He left trusting that." "Trusting who?" Donald's voice cracked like a line that hadn't been played before. "Vanessa, he trusted you." She flinched. "He trusted someone. He trusted that someone would put him back into a position to breathe, to be safe. I told him I'd talk to Joey. But Joey doesn't make promises about things that threaten his neck. He's always been careful." Donald watched her and felt his anger recalibrate itself into something colder than heat. It wasn't just betrayal he felt now. It was the realization that everyone he had thought of as a steady hand had a price they'd paid or been paid to pay. Vanessa's face, when she looked at him, was a map of the choices that looked reasonable to people who measured danger by their own survival. He left Vanessa's with more questions than answers and went to the place where Joey kept his watchful smile. Joey's apartment was a set piece, art on the walls, a record player, a door that looked as if it had been bought at an auction for charisma. Joey opened the door with a casualness that suggested he had been expecting the knock like a scheduled interruption. "Dennis," he said, and there was warmth in his voice that didn't reach his eyes. "You're making a habit of showing up." "You were with Vanessa?" Donald said without preamble. "In any way that mattered to Doug?" Joey stretched out a hand and said, "Man, people have relationships. You'd think you'd be happy a friend finds someone." He let his words hang, soft and non-committal like curtains. "What did Doug want from you?" Donald asked. "He didn't bother with niceties like small talk. Urgency had a brace around it that didn't leave room for pleasantries." Joey's face shifted. "He wanted me to talk to some people, look at a ledger, fix something. I'm not a miracle worker, Dennis. People come to me when they're deep. I can buy time. Sometimes I can smooth things a little. But I don't have the power to make fate take a better route." "You didn't help him," Donald said it plainly, "because he was tired of dances." "You didn't help him and he's dead." Joey shrugged. "I didn't say I wouldn't help. I said I couldn't. There's a difference. And you know I can't spiral my neck into a noose for every man who asks." Donald thought of Bill's noose and Joey's can't, and the pattern of refusals formed a ragged fence around a man who had been left to fall. It was an ugly symmetry. The people who could have helped chose to save themselves rather than a friend. It didn't have to be moral to be true. Walking back through the city, Donald tried to assemble the structure of what he had learned. Drake had gone to the police. Randy was whispering in ears that would carry rumors into evidence. Bill said no. Joey said he couldn't. Vanessa had spoken and hesitated. Marcel dismissed the evidence and maintained his distance. The 2 glasses in the video were a kind of punctuation. Someone had been with Doug in a private way, or someone had left a space that looked like company. The question that hummed now like a wasp over a soda can was whether those refusals were protective gestures, people protecting themselves from a threat too big to handle, or whether the refusals were the first step of a script, a way of arranging the scene so that when someone fell, none of the others were blamed. He rewound the video once more, his finger finding the trackpad like a salve. Doug's smile there, if it was a smile, looked thinner than Donald remembered from their nights of bourbon and busted jokes. It was the smile of a man who'd counted on someone to help and had been told to wait. The light caught the rim of the second glass and made it a circle that could be a halo or a target. Donald felt the world tilt at the edges. There was grief that could be held in two palms, a private grimness, and there was a grief that fed on the bones of betrayal. He was learning there was a violence in inaction as much as there was in action. To refuse help, to place a polite line of no between you and a man who trusts you, sometimes that refusal was itself a weapon. He closed the laptop with a soft snap and looked at Marcel over the top of the screen. "You said you didn't know Doug," he said. "If you didn't know him, why do you act like you do? Why are you so invested in how I watch a clip?" Marcel's face went placid and unreadable. He shrugged and let something like a smile fall across his mouth. "Because people like you look for monsters in frames," he said. "You think a video will make things neat. It won't. It will make them worse." Donald didn't accept the reassurance. He felt argument and anger and a hunger that had nothing to do with the men involved and everything to do with the principle. You don't leave a man in a place where his means of escape is withheld. The city was full of men who didn't know whether the thing that killed them was the thing they did or the thing done by someone else. Doug had trusted people to help him, and he had been left with a second glass to watch. Outside, a siren cut an argument into the night. In the distance, a police cruiser turned its blue light like a lighthouse on a shore of bad decisions. Donald wanted to go to Drake and ask what the police knew, to go to Jacob and find out what Randy had sent, to go to the video and strip it down until it bled meaning. He had to decide what he would do with the knowledge that people who could have helped had chosen not to. He felt the weight of choices settle in him like a stone. He would not be docile about this. He would not let people fold away from pain and pretend they had done enough. Doug had gone to trusted hands and been abandoned. The idea of betrayal wrapped itself around the neck of the city like a vine, and Donald felt the first sharp urge to pull.